Okay, a very good evening to you, and you're welcome to the next edition of The Green Zone here with Eugene Doyle, Conversations with Eugene Doyle here. And this is a platform for hearing another side, which our own mainstream media seem to don't want to give, or naive, or whatever way they are, they don't want to give you the others. Is Can you hear me? Oh yeah, you can.
I lost you for a minute, Eugene.
I
I
lost.
lost you
Yeah, I
for
don't
a
know what
minute.
happened there. But anyway, okay. So the question for tonight's podcast is: Are Ireland's elite anti-Semitic, naive, or comfortable in an ivory tower, sitting driving for utopia? Now, I don't need to introduce you all over again to my guest. My guest is Marco Alexander, who is from the Old Sod and now living, married, and working. Well, not working so much at the moment in Jerusalem. And Marco, you're very, very welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you.
Okay, I want to start off maybe, Marco, in relation to the history of the land, right? The history
Mm,
of the land in which you're residing in now, and
yes.
say some would say that you guys is you guys. When I say you guys, I mean the Jewish people have been in that land non-stop for almost, or not more than 3,000 years. Is that a bridge too far, or is that correct?
No, you're probably understating it. At least 3,000 years. If one looks at the biblical chronology, we'd add a few hundred years to that. And if
Okay,
we're talking about the patriarchs, we'd add another 1,000 years.
okay. Now, so just explain to me. Okay, so you're in the land in the land there, in the Holy Land and whatever, and 2,000 years ago, um, Jesus Christ came along, and out of that came Christianity as a
Mm,
result of Jesus's life on earth, and then his crucifixion and his ascension into heaven, according to the Catholic teaching
mm.
and Christian teaching. Now, so the Romans were in operation there. Tell me a little bit about the Roman occupation there, the Roman rule there.
Well, the Roman occupation essentially begins with Pompey, who arrives quite a few decades before the life of Jesus during the period of the Hasmonean dynasty. Okay, that was the last period of real Jewish independence. Then the Romans arrive and they place basically a vassal king, King Herod, which also the Christian scriptures speak extensively about, both him and his children. Um, the Roman Empire ends in the East, basically in the early 5th century, but it ends in the land of Israel with the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem in 638. So that, essentially speaking, brings an end to the Roman Empire. A Muslim period begins, but which starts, as I mentioned before, in 638. We have a brief period of Crusader rule, which was under 200 years, which began with the arrival of the Crusaders in 1099, and their expulsion by the Mamluks just under 200 years later. We have the Mamluk period, and then we see the arrival of another Muslim dynasty, the Ottoman Empire, which basically is defeated by the British during the course of the Great War. That is the First World War. General Allenby arrives in 1917 and he takes the surrender here in Jerusalem. So that essentially is the beginning of the British period, and which would subsequently be known as the period of the British Mandate, which ends in 1948. It ends in 1948 because the British could no longer handle the situation here. By the way, one has to mention the British had basically reneged on their commitment to facilitate the creation of a Jewish state, and was basically the Jewish underground. There are great parallels with Irish history here, which many of our Irish viewers won't know about, because they have been fed a lot of nonsense during the course of the past 50 years. But if one analyzes the situation in a more detached way, one will see that there are many parallels with Irish history, so much so that many of the leaders of the Jewish underground were inspired by the Irish struggle for independence. So in 1948, Israel gains independence. Bear in mind that in 1947 there had been a partition plan whereby the offer of an Arab state was made. Okay,
Now, before we
so
get,
yeah,
Marco, before we get there, sorry, I just need to
yeah, go
interject
ahead,
there before we get
go
there.
ahead, certainly.
Okay, so before we'll come back and we'll kick off in 1948 and 47 shortly. But
Mm,
tell me this, okay, where, okay, so we're told here that this has been fed in the media here that you are a colonial power
mm,
in the land where you are, that you took over the land of others and conquered their land. Now, tell
mm.
me before you answer that,
Yeah.
tell me, how did the Arabs end up in that land?
Okay. So basically, the Arab Muslim presence basically begins in 638. Okay. When the Arabs Muslim armies basically sweep across the Middle East. They conquered the land of Israel. They extended all their rule all the way across North Africa. They penetrated the east. They conquered Persia. They conquer Spain as well. They conquer southern Italy as well. Sicily was under the Arab Muslim rule for quite a significant amount of time. So within this framework, that's essentially when the Muslim Arab armies arrive and the first Arab settlers arrive. Okay,
Okay.
when the Arabs arrived, there was still a significant Jewish population in the land of Israel. It Go ahead.
And back then, what was the relationship between the Arab, your Arab neighbors or whatever? What was the situation back then between the Jewish people and the Arab people back then?
It certainly was a mixed relationship. Bear in mind that during the course of the Prophet Muhammad's life, the Arabian Peninsula was essentially rendered Judenrein, free of Jews. The Jews were persecuted and ethnically cleansed. So that has to be borne in mind. How did things develop in the land of Israel? Well, as with the other ethnic minorities throughout the newly conquered Muslim land, they were slowly but surely Islamized. So some of the people who would have remained in the land would have been Islamized. They would have been converted to Islam. Social pressure would have been exerted whereby they would have converted to Islam. And that applied not just to Jews, but also to Christians as well. So that's the general pattern. That is not to say that the Muslims were necessarily worse than the Christians in the medieval period, but it's certainly very difficult to say that they were any better. Okay, there were certainly also moments, as we understand, as we know from Spain, where there were moments of relative tolerance. Now, when I say relative tolerance, we can't think of it in terms of a modern liberal democracy. But in Spain, Jews did manage to reach positions of power and influence. There was a flourishing of Jewish philosophy. But on the other hand, what tends to be forgotten is that there were also numerous pogroms in which the Muslim authorities and the Muslim rabble, let's say, murdered thousands of Jews as well. So that's generally the relation. It was never very easy for the Jews in medieval Europe or the lands under Muslim control. It was a very precarious existence.
Now, in a moment, I want to go back to the partition plan in a moment, but I just want,
Mm.
for our listeners, I just want to ask our listeners, if you're listening and you want to partake in the conversation, you can drop a comment in the chat. we can see it here and bring it up and read it, and Marco will endeavour to answer if it's a question that you have from. So, drop a comment in the chat anytime throughout this webinar. Now, you can also subscribe for more insights. So I'd ask you to hit that subscribe button below for more insights as well. And then, if you like what you're hearing, that you don't have to agree with it, but if you like what you're hearing, then I'd ask you to like and share. That would be really, really helpful to spread the webinar and allow people to be more in tune with the other side of different stories that we will carry here on the Green Zone here over the next number of weeks and months. And of course, you can, and so I just ask you to do those couple of things if you could. That'd be great. Now, Marco, back to the partition plan. So now we're explain to me how the partition plan, how that all came about.
Okay, so basically the British were incapable of ruling the area. Basically, the Jewish resistance understood that they were reneging on all their agreements, and basically they were doing the utmost to liberate the country from British rule at the time. Now, the British, subsequent to that, to all this activity, basically returned the mandate to the United Nations, and there was a partition plan which was voted upon, which basically would have entailed, and I think people really need to get this straight, 44% of the land which is within the 1967 borders now, I'm going to emphasize this point, would have also been under Arab control. Okay?
So 44% of the land
that it,
that was in place at the 1967 time.
44% of the land which Israel controlled up until 1967. So there was no Israeli presence in the in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. Okay, bear in mind this: the Arabs would have had control of a further 44% of pre-1967 Israel, according to that partition plan. They refused. Okay? They refused the partition. So Israel would have had just a little slip of land that would have been a Jewish homeland, a ridiculous amount. Now, bear in mind, too,
was there a saying by one of your Jewish leaders, give us a postage size of a postage stamp and we'll make it work?
Exactly. So people have been blinded to this fact because it's been drowned out by the wall of distortion which the mainstream media have been foisting upon the people. Now, also, one has to bear in mind that no mention is made of a Palestinian people. They were essentially speaking of another Arab state. Okay? So there was no question of an oppressed Palestinian people within all this situation.
They were Arabs.
They were Arabs, yes. They
Okay.
were Arab.
Okay.
Say they were Arab speaking of various different ethnicities. Now, bear in mind that also that the people who were referred to as Palestinians in this period were the Jews that were living in the land of Israel.
Okay.
Okay. Golda Meir, sorry.
Just explain to the people where the name Palestine came from.
Okay, Palestine, essentially speaking, it has a long history, but it's mentioned by Herodotus for the first time, the Greek historian, but it really comes into force subsequent to the destruction of the last vestige of Jewish independence, which was the Bar Kokhba revolt. So Hadrian basically wants to put an end to Jewish insurgents. He wins the last great battle with Bar Kokhba, and in around 135 AD, and he renames Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina, and what was known as Judea under the Romans becomes part of Syria Palestina. Now, Palestina itself is derived from Philistines. The Philistines were a federation of people that lived more or less along the coast of present-day Israel, in 5 cities, which was the Pentapolis. So that's essentially speaking what happened. So to rub salt into the wounds, he said, we'll take the name of Israel's arch enemies and we'll name this land after them.
Okay. And then, so in effect, the Palestinians that in reality were the Jewish people that were living in that area at the time.
Exactly. During the now, but the name Palestine was sort of reintroduced with the British mandate. So both areas of the both sides of the Jordan River were Palestine, with the British mandate of Palestine. Then the British lobbed bits off. It began shrinking the Jewish area. But that is essentially speaking when the period when the term Palestine was revived to refer to a geographically bounded area. Okay? But there was no question of a people known as the Palestinians in this period. There were different ethnicities living within the land.
Well,
Okay,
now,
so we can, yeah,
yeah, can I say there, because
yeah,
we have always been told here that the Palestinian people, we've always been given the impression that the Palestinian people are a people with a culture, a language, a way of life. Yeah, that's the impression we're given. But you're saying that is not the case.
no. No, there's no such thing as a Palestinian people or a Palestinian nation in the real sense of the word, whereby a group of people come together and there's a process of ethnogenesis and they become one unit. And we could take the Irish example. The Irish are an ancient people which has undergone certain identifiable phases which have come to constitute a people. The Irish is a great example of that.
Mm.
Okay, but in no way can we say that the so-called Palestinian people fulfill any of these criteria. The notion of a Palestinian people only begins in 1964. And it begins in 1964 for a very good reason, when the Arabs realize that they cannot win a head-on war with the Jewish state, or in any case, when they realize it's going to be very difficult to win a head-on war. They have to somehow influence public opinion and turn the tables. By the way, they did this very successfully. As a public relations operation, as a work of propaganda, it is a masterclass. One has to what happens? Essentially speaking, up until 1964, during the 60s, the Jews in the land of Israel, the Israelis, were perceived as the David against the Goliath of the surrounding Arab countries. What essentially happens is, under Soviet influence, and here we see the marriage of the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which comes together with a Soviet capacity for propaganda. And this, essentially speaking, is the beginning of the notion of a Palestinian people, which slowly but surely seeps into the public consciousness. Now, when I was a boy, I can remember periods when people still didn't refer to the Arabs as Palestinians here. Okay, it's only in the past 3 or 4 decades that it has reached a climax.
Yeah,
And
because
it's been repeated so much that people take it as a given, but it
yeah.
certainly isn't.
So unlike Ireland, which you use as a perfect example of a historical people who have there's so many historical people that the Irish can call upon that have done
Indeed.
amazing things. In the case of the Palestinian, that what there's now being referred to as the Palestinian people, they don't have. Am I right in saying they don't have historical people that they can look to? Kind
No,
of.
no.
Kind of famous engineers or famous doctors or famous thing. They don't have that. Is that what you're saying?
Nothing. No, no. There is no such thing as a Palestinian history or archaeology in the real sense of the word. Okay, nothing certainly dating before 100 years, 50, 70 years. The Arabs in what is now Israel refuse the term Palestinian. The term Palestinian is an exonym, that it is a term applied from without. Okay? They didn't define themselves as such, and with good reason, because their identity is and was to a great extent tribal and ethnic. Here we have different ethnic groups. We have Christians. We have various Muslim clans. We have the Druze population, which is a very long-standing population here, and their presence here is longer than most of the Muslims here in the land of Israel, and they don't define themselves as Palestinians. We have the Circassians as well, and they certainly don't consider themselves Palestinians, even though their presence in this part of the world antecedes many of the Muslims that live here now, because many of the Muslims that live here are the result of very recent migrations during the period of the British Mandate. Bear in mind that this land was to a great extent a barren land, incapable of sustaining a large population. It is only with the return of the Jews to the land of Israel that industries are created, that innovative agriculture is introduced, thus enabling a serious demographic increase. Now, I'm not blaming the Arabs for coming to the country. I understand that's perfectly understandable, but certainly one cannot speak of an ancient Palestinian population. That is a gross misrepresentation of reality.
Because the Jewish people made good land that others would have just written off.
Absolutely.
They made good of that, and a lot
Absolutely.
of these Arabs would have come to earn their crust, if you like.
Exactly, and
Earn it.
understandably so. Understand,
Absolutely.
people are looking for a better livelihood, and that's perfectly fine. I have Arab friends, and they tell me my family came from Syria, what is now Syria. My family came from Yemen. Okay, so there's nothing to be ashamed of, but these are the facts.
Yeah, and but also the Jewish people welcomed them. They needed them to work as well, didn't they?
Well, they well, let's say, well, this, I'm not sure we would say welcome in the traditional sense. This, it wasn't for the Jews to welcome or not welcome. The British were controlling, or
Okay.
rather, they weren't controlling. So there was an influx of Arabs. Now, some maintain that the British did more than just close an eye, but actively encouraged Arab migration to present day Israel, while at the same time blocking an escape route for the Jews during the period of the Nazi regime and the Holocaust. And this is another chapter which we can discuss perhaps in another podcast.
Absolutely. Now, just bring me through the various stages in which the Arabs were offered estates. You starting back in 1948 when they refused.
They
They refused,
refuse it.
and
Yeah, yeah,
they were getting land that was, as you say, 44% more than what was in 1967.
absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
why? Okay, why did they refuse it? And then bring me through the next phase of what happened.
Right.
What did they do when they refused it?
Right. Essentially speaking, now I'm not saying that every Arab wanted this, but I'm saying this was the official position in the Arab world. There are plenty of decent Arabs who have been silenced, and the dissenting voices will be silenced very often. Okay. In 1947, the partition plan was refused. Now, essentially speaking, the reason for the refusal has remained the same during the course of the years: an intolerance to a Jewish presence in what was previously land under Islamic control. That is one reason. And also, there, among certain elements within Islam, the idea of a Jewish sovereign state is an anathema to them. They had always been used to having the upper hand, and hence this sort of reversal didn't sit well with their understanding of Islamic doctrine. Okay, that is essentially the reason: an intolerance towards Jews and the notion of an independent Jewish state, which has continued during the course of the years. It has never been just about a territory. It's been about the notion of Jews being sovereigns in their own land.
Okay. Okay. Now, so that was 1948. Okay.
Yes.
Then okay, we move forward then to when 1967 then again, is it?
No, we have we was we have to bear in mind that the Arabs declared war in 1948. It's a war which they ultimately lost,
Now
and
here,
this is when this
this is sorry, this is where we're being fed the line here that not you, but the Jewish state then expelled all the Arabs out
right,
of
right,
out
right,
of them
right,
because of the war.
right,
Tell me what
right.
the real situation there was.
Right. Well, there was no Arab expulsion until the beginning of the war, because basically war had been declared upon the Jewish people, a war, a genocidal war. The Arabs, the surrounding Arab states, essentially, they didn't mince their word about the fate that would have awaited the Jewish people. So the war begins, and during the course of a war, obviously, to have hostile populations is a problem. Now, that doesn't mean that the Jews expelled all the Arabs. No, certainly not. But there were instances where people were, let's say, encouraged to leave. But the prime reason why Arabs left was because their own leadership called on them to leave in order to permit the invading Arab armies to wipe out the Jews. There are many recorded instances of the nascent Israeli government asking the Arabs to stay.
And the with the call the Arabs to leave by their leaders. Their leaders were confident they could take over Israel in a matter of days. Isn't that right?
Whether it was in a matter of days or weeks, I can't really say, but certainly that was their desire, and their stated objective was to free the land of the Jews. This was the state of it. Now, when I say free the land of the Jews, it is a euphemism. It
Okay.
is a
Yeah. Yeah.
euphemism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So, sorry if I interrupt you. So,
go
when
ahead.
people you bandy the word genocide, what the real truth of the matter is that genocide has been the objective of many of the Arab countries since the foundation of the State of Israel.
Well, now, Marco, we have protests on the streets here in Dublin, Cork, Limerick, wherever, looking about the poor Palestinian people. And one of the chants that is very regular is from the river to the sea.
Mm.
Now, I myself think that most people have no clue which river they're talking about and which sea they're talking about. So, explain that phrase from the river to the sea. Is this
Right.
at the heart? Is this at the heart of why the Arabs refused to be sectioned for their own state or their own land?
Well, they're actually being very honest. This is their stated intention, to free the land of the Jews from the Jordan River to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So we're not talking about a so-called Palestinian state in the West Bank or in Judea and Samaria. We're talking about this fictitious construct in both Judea and Samaria and the pre-1967 borders of the State of Israel.
Okay.
You see, the actual what has been practiced upon the Irish people in particular, because Ireland has taken a very, at least at a state level, it has taken a very severe attitude towards Israel.
Hostile.
Yes, it's a very hostile attitude, and people don't really understand what's going on. This is the truth of the matter. They don't understand that, because now the Irish government talks about, and not just the Irish government talks about, the two-state solution. A two-state solution has been offered numerous times. Okay, but what Palestinism really entails is not a two-state solution. It entails getting a bit of land, as much land as possible, and then extending the conflict to recover what they consider historic Palestine. And they have stated this many times. There is abundant literature on this. They we have the so-called plan of phases of the PLO, which entailed diplomacy, building up strength within territory that Israel conceded to them, and then eventually, when enough strength was built up, coming in for the kill. This is very important. It's very important that people bear this in mind.
Now, we're often told here, in relation to the Palestinian, Palestinian, and I'll come to your phrase in a moment about it.
Mm.
But we're often, what's at the heart of what the Irish people are being taught here is that the Palestinian people are being compared to what Ireland went through with the UK, with England for 700
Right,
years.
right.
That we were colonized, and therefore we fought back. We fought back and gained our independence and all of that. And this is being directly correlated with the experience of the Palestinian people. Now, I would imagine that you would say that is wholly inaccurate.
It is a complete disanalogy, Eugene. It is quite the opposite. It is Israel that has been colonized by Muslim Arabs since the 7th century. The Jewish population has been gradually eliminated, or had been gradually eliminated, by various Muslim regimes up until the return of the Jews, the beginning of the return en masse of the Jews 150 odd years ago. That is essentially what has been happening. Bear in mind that even 150 years ago, the Jews were a majority in Jerusalem. So it is a complete disanalogy because, as I mentioned before, the great bulk of the Arabs in the land of Israel today are the descendants of very recent migrations. And one could draw the analogy with what happened in the north of Ireland with the plantation. So the analogy that they're attempting to draw, but it's in bad faith. I think you have to bear this in mind. It is in bad faith. There are historical reasons for this. Certainly, when I was growing up, it wasn't as skewed as this. Certainly, now it has reached very serious levels, but not necessarily amongst the common people. It's generally the chattering classes.
Hmm.
The common people have other worries. Bear in mind, Israel shares no border. There's no land dispute with the Republic of Ireland. So, in a sense, reality has been manufactured.
Okay. Now, bring me through just very. So we've dealt with 1948 briefly. Then we had the next major one was 1967.
Hold your horses there, because we have
Okay.
1956, and we
Oh,
have all the
1950. Okay.
acts of terrorism that happened in between the wars.
Okay.
Now, bear in mind that we're not talking about Palestine yet, the Palestinian people yet.
Yeah.
Okay,
No mention of that up to now.
this is yet to come. Okay, it was the various Arab states which use the pretext of the displaced Arabs to wage war. It is, essentially speaking, a proxy war by the surrounding Arab states to a great extent. Okay, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and much of the other rest of the Arab world, Iraq as well, Saudi Arabia. Things have changed, by the way. Things have changed, but at the beginning, it was the Arab Muslim world in general which was waging a proxy war and using the issue of the refugees as a pretext for this.
Okay. Now, so in that intervening period, we had many acts of terrorism.
Numerous acts of terror,
And
numerous acts on innocent civilians.
yeah,
Yeah.
then in 1967, then the other countries around Israel really showed their colors in 1967, did they not?
Well, certainly under the influence of Nasser and Arabism, they were planning a genocidal war, another genocidal war. They were waging continuous terror attacks. They were amassing troops in the Sinai Desert. They closed the Straits of Hormuz, which constituted a casus belli. So Israel decides to take preemptive action. It wasn't going to wait to be attacked, of course, with Syrians and Egyptians amassing their troops on Israel's border. Bear in mind that we're talking about a country within the 1967 borders, Eugene. So from the eastern border, which was the armistice line, to the Mediterranean Sea, we're talking of places with less than 20 kilometers in width. Okay, so this
Okay.
was the precarious state that Israel was in at the moment. Now Israel takes preemptive action and attacks and destroys the Egyptian and Syrian forces within the space of a few days. Now, while they're doing that, they're urging King Hussein not to join the war. Okay? Bear in mind, King Hussein of Jordan had illegally occupied Judea, Samaria / West Bank. Unfortunately, King Hussein was fooled, or he wanted to be fooled by Nasser, and decides to attack Israel.
Okay.
And that is when Israel liberates or gains control of Judea and Samaria. So there was no Israeli presence in the area which the so-called Palestinians claim to want as an independent state. That only happens in 1967. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was founded in 1964.
Okay.
These things aren't being told to the Irish people. Okay, this is a problem. This
And
is a problem.
enter Yasser Arafat.
Enter stage right, Yasser Arafat. Yes, enter stage right, Yasser Arafat. Indeed.
Okay. Now, then the PLO was building and very effective at its PR, as you rightly said.
They gave a masterclass in PR.
No doubt. And
That was, and let me just say this, Eugene, their masterclass was matched by the incompetence of the Israelis. Because the Israelis, it has truth be told, have shown for many decades gross incompetence.
Okay. Now, then in the intervening years, there was obviously lots of terrorism. Then 1973.
1973, we have the Yom Kippur War, where the Arab states, Syria and Egypt, launch an attack on Israel. Israel is in a very difficult situation for the first few days. Then it manages to turn the tables, and indeed, the Israeli army under Ariel Sharon manages even to cross the Suez Canal. Okay, so despite the early setback, Israel basically wins that war as well.
Okay. Now, I'm going to fast forward a bit because the next thing, and I mean, if there's something in between that you want to
Mm.
specifically talk about, but I want to talk about the Oslo Accords.
Mm.
And how they came about, and was there a lot of incompetence on behalf of Israel in relation to this as well? But tell our listeners about the Oslo Accords, where
Okay,
that all came
now before we speak about the Oslo Accords, I want to mention the plan of phases of the PLO, which was a 10-point program which was devised in 1974, whereby they the phase one was to establish a foothold, establish a national authority on any Palestinian territory liberated from Israeli control, to gain a political and geographical base for further struggle. Then to strengthen that base, consolidate power and legitimacy in any liberated area, within inverted commas, build institutions and gain international recognition. So they were using their brains, these people. Then to expand liberation, use the base to support further military, political, and diplomatic actions until the full liberation of Palestinian territories as defined pre 1948. Okay. Now, I wanted to preface the Oslo Accords with
from?
this, because
Absolutely.
there is a line of logic which leads on from the PLO's plan of phases. Okay. Now, the Oslo Accords basically came about in a period when Israel had achieved its maximum security for the Jewish people in 2,000 years. Okay, this is the absurdity of it all. A philosophy begins to appear whereby the notion of land for peace becomes the operative concept. Okay. And this basically is the premise for the Oslo Accords. Israel didn't need to enter into these accords. It was something which the left-wing government of the time foisted onto the Israeli people to a great extent. It was basically an underhand operation, and it was carried out in contravention of Israeli law. There were contacts, illegal contacts with the PLO, which according to Israeli law was illegal at the time. Anyway, what transpires subsequently is the notion that land for peace is something that was workable. There were contacts between the two sides, various memorandums were signed. Israel cedes territory to the PLO, which subsequently became the PA. Now, there was no mention of a Palestinian state within the Oslo Accords, but it did involve ceding the major population centers to what subsequently became the Palestinist Authority. So they gain a foothold in Judea, in Samaria, and most of the major Arab population centers fall under the PA.
Okay.
Now, the idea was that they could take care of internal security and basically self-govern, okay? And then the idea was, let's see where it goes, okay? Let's see where it goes, how they manage their own affairs, so on and so forth. But without the need for the prophetic sense, it could only go in one direction, okay? And what Yasser Arafat and his friends said to the English-speaking audience was one thing. What he said to the Arabic-speaking audience was another thing. So much so that in his famous speech in the mosque in South Africa, he spoke of the Oslo Accords as something akin to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which is an important landmark in Islamic history, which dates to the nascent period of Islam, where Muhammad enters into a treaty with other tribes. Now, he does this only in order to build up his strength and then to subsequently vanquish them. Okay? So
Okay.
the Oslo Accords were merely a means, a stepping stone to the destruction of the state of Israel. Unfortunately, the Israeli government at the time, the Israeli, a large part of Israeli academia, media, chose to close their eyes to this, or willingly and knowingly failed to join the dots. It's a bit like having a recidivist pedophile and expecting him to be a good babysitter. That's the absurdity of it all.
Okay. So the Abraham Accord, or not the Abraham Accords, the Oslo Accords have been the order of the day, if you like, for even up to now. They're still in vogue. The Oslo Accords, they're still in vogue. But
That
um,
is generally the sort of operative concept, but the Palestinians have been in breach of this since the beginning. Okay, now there have been intervening um, attempts. We had Ehud Barak, Israel prime minister in the year 2000, who basically offered more than 90% of Judea and Samaria to the Palestinist authorities and compensating the rest with land swaps of what is today the state of Israel. Okay, that was one. And we had a similar offer by Prime Minister Olmert, and that was met with a similar refusal as well. So people should be able to understand at this stage that there is no real interest in a Palestinian state. It is a fictitious construct, a construct whose only aim is the elimination of the Jewish presence in the ancient ancestral homeland.
now I'm reminded here because and I think people should know this because there was in Dublin, a march in Dublin in early July that was making its way from Christchurch Cathedral to the GPO by the Muslim parade taking place, and it was met with a counter demonstration by the Irish Freedom Party. Now,
Yes.
one of the things that I suppose sent shivers down my spine was that one of the imams speaking at that parade said, "quote This is our country. This is our land. Uh, there's no one loves this Ireland more than no one loves this land more than the Irish than we do. In other words, we love it more than the Irish do.
Right. Right.
Now, these people are brought into the country as immigrants. So to me, that kind of sounds very, very scary and not to be ignored because it goes back to what you're saying in relation to that every time they were offered something, they would turn it down because they wanted everything.
Yes. 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 It should now. I believe the people in Ireland are beginning to join the dots in the sense that Palestinism is nothing but sugar coated jihad. Unfortunately, the Irish people for many years have swallowed this. It's been practiced upon the Irish people, the normal people, by the elites, by the media, by academia, by the politicians. Essentially speaking, Palestinism is jihad. And what Palestinism has done in Ireland, much as similarly to what it has done in other European countries, it has weakened the immune system of the Irish people. This is an aggressive system which tricks the immune system, and it is misrepresenting jihadi Islam. Palestinism is jihadi Islam, essentially speaking. And what they're trying to do is insinuate themselves increasingly into host societies, conquering public spaces, conquering places which are of historic importance to the Irish people. I'm familiar with the march that started at Christchurch Cathedral, I believe, and then ended up at the GPO. Now, why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody want to organize mass prayers in Croke Park?
Yeah, because the GPO for is a central point for the for gaining Irish freedom.
Indeed, it is exactly. It is a
Yeah,
central. They want to appropriate the holy places and the public spaces of the Irish nation.
and
Okay,
Croke Park then is a part of our identity, which is sees us as a nation, having
absolutely,
hurling and having hurling and
absolutely,
Gaelic football
absolutely,
in them. So, I
absolutely,
mean,
absolutely.
why would you let people have their prayers in
Why would they want to do it, Eugene? People have to ask themselves that question. Aren't there enough mosques in Ireland where they can hold their prayer services? Why the need to take over public space in a
Mm,
country which is Christian?
okay.
There is an agenda here. Unfortunately, the wool has been pulled over people's eyes for too long. I see that people are beginning to wake up, but it's only the beginning. It's going to take a lot more.
Now, let me move to the disengagement from Gaza, which brings us to the current situation. The disengagement from Gaza by Ariel Sharon in 2006. Am I correct?
2005.
2005.
Yeah.
Okay. What were the first of all? What were the Israeli people told that allowed this to go ahead? So full disengagement. I mean, means there wasn't once it happened, there wasn't a single footprint of an Israeli footprint on that land in Gaza. What were the people of Israel told the method behind disengaging from there?
Oh, the people of Israel were hoodwinked by the government of the time. They were hoodwinked.
In what way? Like,
They were guaranteed security. They were told that should any attack emanate from Gaza, the response would be immediate, that they would be crushed, and nothing of the sort happened. And within a very short space of time, all those magnificent agricultural structures that they left behind in the Gaza Strip were transformed into military bases. And very soon thereafter, Hamas took hold, and we saw the beginning of waves and waves of missiles coming into the state of Israel when there was no Israeli presence in the Gaza Strip. The Jewish population there was ripped out of the Gaza Strip.
now
Hence, they were fully sovereign in that area, and that could have served as an experiment, Eugene. That could have said, had it gone well, other areas would have been evacuated according to this logic.
now was Israel taken by surprise, or was everyone surprised? Because first of all, the PA ran the Gaza at first,
Yes,
and then elections took place, which saw the Hamas being being the favored elected people
yes,
in Gaza. First
yes.
of all, were Israelis taken by surprise at that development?
Um, some were taken by surprise. I think that many were not. I certainly wasn't taken by surprise. I've always been against any withdrawal from land won in a defensive war. Many people warned that this had happened. One didn't need the prophetic sense to understand that this was going to happen. We have enough precedents in order for us to be able to understand what will happen. Many of the politicians fell into disgrace. They brushed off the possibility of any aggression, any missile attack. I remember even one of them saying, "What a load of nonsense. This is absolutely ridiculous that attacks should come from Gaza." Alas, it came to pass.
It came to pass, and so and Ariel Sharon passed away shortly after that.
Yes, yes, he passed away not too short. He actually broke out. He left the Likud, formed another party, which, truth be told, won an election. Okay, the Kadima party won an election. Okay, some people believed, even people on the center right, believed perhaps it'll work out. Okay. So they
okay.
won an election. He formed a party called Kadima, where people from even Shimon Peres, who started in the Labour Party, ended up there. So many people were actually fooled by this. They were taken in by this, but it soon turned very sour.
And you would imagine that having disengaged from Gaza and in any other, if any other group of people were given that land, that they would have turned it into an oasis. They would have turned it. They would have the economy would have thrived there. They would have built underground transport systems. But instead, what we got,
Oh, they built the underground transport systems, Eugene. I don't think we can get away from that to
yeah,
transport missiles and hide hostages. We have a metropolitan system there which exceeds that of many of the great world cities. They fulfill that part of it. They have a metropolitan service.
yeah, I was getting to that. I was getting that. I was actually being, I was being sarcastic. But okay, so um, next thing, okay, so we're turning to Ireland again. Next thing, October
Mm,
7th. October 7th
yeah,
comes.
yeah.
What has really irked me is that since October the 7th, I was just counting on them. I was just counting. No, it's not a scientific count, but I was counting the amount of headlines on the mainland mainstream media here, RTE.
Mm,
I was counting the amount of times that the headline had Israeli strikes kill so many in Gaza,
mm, mm,
and
mm.
I came up with practically 150
Yes,
in the
yes,
last 2 years. And
yes.
what I found from this is that this was there's no doubt about it that this was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
That
Yes,
would
yes,
happen on October the
yeah.
7th.
On one day, in one day, 1,400 people were killed. Yes, yes, in one
Now,
day.
what
Not
I'm
that I think we have to bear in mind they weren't just killed, they were raped, their sexual organs were mutilated. People need to know this. Babies were burnt in ovens, and they filmed themselves doing it. They
yeah,
film themselves. This is documented. And I want to point this out qualitatively. This is worse than what the Nazis did 80 years ago. The Nazis tried to hide their atrocities. The Palestinians boasted about it.
I noticed throughout our conversation, Marco, this evening, I noticed that you use a word that we're not familiar with over here, Palestinists.
Exactly, exactly.
Tell me
Because,
the origin. Tell me the origin of that.
well, it's a word that I started using about 25 years ago because I don't believe we can dignify a distorted terrorist entity with something as honorable as nationhood. Okay, so basically, I started using it about 25 years ago. I wrote a couple of things about it. I still write some things on this subject where I speak of Palestinism as an ideology and Palinist as somebody who's a proponent of this distorted ideology. And I developed the thing, and I'm in the process also of developing it further. But the main reason why I do it is because I don't dignify it with a notion of nationhood. Nationhood applies to real nations, the Irish nation, the Jewish nation in the land of Israel, many European nations. And I'll say something else. Palestinism is the greatest oppressive force within Judea and Samaria of the Arab people. It poisons their mind. There are many people there, many Arabs there, who want to have nothing to do with this. They are distancing themselves from it.
Now, going back to Ireland's reaction to October the 7th, the one thing that has irked me over and over again is obviously the headlines I just spoke to you about, but also that every time something is mentioned about ending the war in Gaza, there is rarely a mention of the hostages that remain in Gaza in absolutely terrible conditions, innocent people that were taken hostage by Hamas. There's
Right.
nothing about the war crimes that they are committing by using their own people as human shields, and we continue. When I say we, the chattering classes in Ireland continue day in and day out to accuse Israel of genocide. And they're trying to even trying to get the word genocide changed to what they believe it should be. And genocide, to me, is to me, if Israel wanted genocide in Gaza or in even in Judea, Samaria, they would be able to do it practically overnight if they wanted to do it. Am I right about that?
Without a shadow of a doubt. If it wanted to eliminate the population, it would certainly do it in a very efficient way. This is not the case. Okay. Now, what you say about the people focusing on everything except the plight of the hostages and of the victims who were mutilated, tortured, burnt alive bears unwitting testimony to the bad faith of politicians, academics, and people in the media, not just in Ireland, but throughout Europe. This is bad faith, and it also gives us an insight to the level of hatred for things Jewish.
Okay, so um, it got so bad here. It got so bad here from the president down,
Mm.
president down, that Foreign Minister Saar um, closed the embassy, the Israeli embassy in Dublin, because he said that Ireland had crossed the red line. Do you agree?
I believe the state, the institutions crossed the red line, not the people. The people have been hoodwinked. The people I remember Ireland as an island of generous people, warm people. There was very little. I certainly, as a Jew, felt very. There were very few instances of anti-Semitism, which I certainly encountered elsewhere. What I think is that this disastrous ideology of Palestinism has been practiced upon the Irish people. And the Irish people are paying the prices now because it has weakened the immune system of the Irish people. It has given them an idea of a sweet and cuddly jihad, which has opened the floodgates to people who have bad intentions, who are attacking the fabric of Irish society, as we've seen recently. All these people who take over the public spaces when they celebrate certain Muslim holidays. They're all with the Palestinian flag, going from one sacred area of Ireland to the other, taking over public spaces. Unfortunately, people have been hoodwinked, Eugene. Palestinism is coming back to bite people in Europe and in Ireland.
Do you believe do you believe that Ireland's situation can only get worse through immigration of certain cultures?
Yes, in to be blunt, perfectly yes. Both the quality and quantity of certain types of immigration are to the detriment of the Irish people. When you have ethnicities or religions that are incapable of weaving themselves into the fabric of Irish life, you're opening the gates of hell.
Okay. Now, let me talk about the president, Donald Trump, and Gaza at the moment. Right? Okay, so we have a standoff in Gaza at the moment. We have the crazy situation where a terrorist organization is demanding impossible conditions from Israel in relation to withdrawing from Gaza, places that it has taken over, and is preventing further attacks. What do you make of the current situation and Donald Trump's part in it?
Look, Donald Trump is certainly a vast improvement to the previous president, who was a total incompetent. I'm not sure whether Donald Trump fully understands the problem. He wants to avoid wars. That's certainly admirable. But in some instances, you have to get to the root of the problem. And that entails a war that obtains its objectives. And this is, go ahead.
Now, we're also being fed the line here about Netanyahu in Ireland as being, a warmonger, a genocidal prime minister, only in power to save himself from trials that he's currently attending at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Also that he wants to satisfy the extreme right, or far right, as it's called here, the far right in government in Israel. What's your assessment of Benjamin Netanyahu since the start of this war?
I think he was the right person to handle this situation. I think he'll go down as one of the great prime ministers, maybe the greatest prime minister Israel has had, along with David Ben-Gurion, the founding prime minister of the state of Israel. He's being systematically slandered. That is, the politicians in Ireland are no exception to that. I'd like to draw your attention to an interesting fact. Now, where these politicians and academics and the media, they're busy slandering Israel, I've noticed their absence with regard to events of real genocide throughout the Middle East. Where are they with regard to the Christians that are being massacred and are the victims of genocide throughout the Middle East? Where are they with regard to this? I notice their absence. Do they ever say anything about the massacre of Christians in the Middle East, in Africa? And here we're talking about real genocide. There's
no.
There's a deafening silence. Christians are being wiped out throughout the Middle East. The population of Christians in areas under the PA, I've mentioned this on numerous occasions, the Christian population of Bethlehem has diminished from 80% to 20% since the Oslo Accords, and controlled by the PA. Have they ever had anything to say about that?
No, and surprisingly, the church authorities here have had little to say about it either, which is really what they got is really strange, because they have plenty to say about what's happening in Gaza.
Yes,
plenty to say about that, and so. I suppose it's a blessing that we don't have any of the elite chattering classes in Ireland being in any position to do anything. But we're okay. So just in relation to the Abraham Accords, and the reason I bring this up is because I was talking to some friends there last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever like that, and I was mentioning about the Abraham Accords, and they said, "What are those?" And I said, they're the Abraham Accords. They were started by President Donald Trump in his first visit to the White House, or first taking over as president of the White House. And I said they were designed to improve and create relations with Arab countries, with the state of Israel. Peace, if you like, and economics and all of that. And they had never heard of it. The reason they hadn't heard of it, I mean, let's just face it.
It's been drowned out. It's been drowned out.
Because anything, whether if Donald Trump went on the side of the road and he saved a guy from an attack, he'd be at fault. So in Ireland, because he's not recognized. I think that anything he can't do anything right at all. But the Abraham Accords, in some way, can transform the Middle East. But I know you have reservations about some of it. But and we'll talk about that in a second, because I just want to show this comment here. What was the reaction among the Irish people regarding the bombing of the nuclear sites in Iran?
That's one for you, Eugene. That's one for you.
Well, it was carried in the news. It was carried in the news, but at no point, Gustavo, was it ever said that Iran was a rogue state, that it was a danger to not only Israel, but a danger to the entire Middle East, and indeed to the United States and the West, if it had been allowed to proceed and enrich uranium. Nothing about that, but about Israel attacking it, and no more. So it's there's no kudos there for Israel, bringing that to a closure for now, anyway. No kudos from the Irish state. So that's the way.
Eugene, I seem to recall quite cordial relations between the Uachtaráin, the president of Ireland, and the Iranian regime. I think a certain letter which came into the public domain seemed to indicate great cordiality with regard to efforts for peace.
Yeah.
Am I mistaken? Have I overstated?
Absolutely not mistaken. When the new president of Iran was installed, he did receive a letter that was made public, congratulating him from the Irish president here, congratulating him on his appointment, and how great it was. No different, I suppose, no different in some ways to the Irish state sending condolences to on Hitler's demise.
De Valera, you're referring to the De Valera episode.
Yes, I am. De Valera, who was the leader of the Fianna Fáil at the time, or the president. Or Fianna Fáil, he was the head of Fianna Fáil at the time.
Yeah, he was the Taoiseach. Was he the Taoiseach?
He was the Taoiseach at the time. Yeah, he was the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So so that's the answer to that, Gustavo. I hope that helps, and thank you indeed for.
Although I must say that De Valera was much friendlier to the Jewish people than the current Uachtaráin. He was much more friendly.
For sure. Absolutely. There's no question about it. No question about that. No question about that. But but anyway, back to the Abraham Accords, Marco. I firmly believe that the Abraham Accords could transform the Middle East for the good. The inclusion at some point of Saudi Arabia, which is key to it. It can't happen nothing more can really happen without them involved.
Indeed.
And more. What's your view on the expansion of the Abraham Accords, and where do you see a pause? Where should we pause? Because there's mention of Trump has mentioned Syria, for example, and and Syria's just installed a new government and ousted Assad with the help of Israel, by the way.
Yes, I don't think the intention was to install a jihadi regime, which is the regime currently in office, as it were. To extend a hand to this regime, I'm very wary of any hands extended to a bloodthirsty jihadi ISIS regime, which has been murdering minorities. I'm very wary of that. I think we'll be subject to blowback should we go down that road. I think Israel has to maintain a very strong presence in the buffer zone and make sure that these people don't get up to any mischief. I wouldn't extend
Would you
any
agree?
legitimacy to them.
Would you agree that? Would you agree that in the case of lifting sanctions, that really the U.S. president didn't have a huge amount of wriggle room here? In other words, a state right beside you with unknown, as you say, jihadi people in it, it was better to give them a chance to at least try and prove themselves if they are what they say and they want peace. He had no real choice only to lift the sanctions, because that time will tell, will it not?
I wouldn't go down that road, Eugene. I wouldn't give them the time of day.
Okay.
These are jihadis. These are cutthroats. These are people who have murdered hundreds of thousands of innocent people, Christians, Alawites recently in the most barbaric way. You can't sit at a table with these people, even if they do wear double-breasted suits.
Okay, and tell me about so tell me about the inclusion of others in the Abraham Accords, where that might lead to.
Well, we're talking about people. I believe Azerbaijan wants to adhere to the Abraham Accords, and this is an example of a moderate Islamic regime with which Israel has very good relations. Also, there has been talk of extending the Abraham Accords to various entities within the land of Israel, namely to the area of Hebron, which I mentioned in a previous podcast, is one of the few productive areas under the PA which has a real economy. That may be a possibility, but of course they have to detach themselves from the PA. They need to be able to muster the courage
Is
to
that
detach
possible,
themselves.
Marco? Is that possible?
Yes, I do think it's possible. I do think it's possible. Yes.
And okay, so if it pulled away from the PA, what could Hebron be declared then? What could it be declared
It
to have?
could be, yes, it could be an autonomous self-governing area with Israeli security control, with no control over foreign affairs. I would exclude that. A sort of a canton along the Swiss model, but
Okay,
certainly in no shape or form anything that could compromise the state of Israel.
but the real turning point for the Abraham Accords would be if Saudi Arabia came on board, would it not?
Mm, mm. Well, to a certain extent, Saudi Arabia is on board, because the Emirates wouldn't have entered into an agreement had the Saudis not given them the nod.
Okay. And would it
Yeah.
be your belief that the current prince the leader in Saudi, the fact that the father is still alive, the king,
Yeah.
do you believe that he wants to go down that road, but he has a lot of people to keep sweet for the moment?
Yes, that is my understanding. Yes, it's not something he can do in the blink of an eye. Bear in mind that Saudi Arabia was one of the more hostile regimes towards Israel. It was also financing extremist mosques in Europe as well. I think this is also worth mentioning. This has changed in recent years, but of course there are still people who hold these views. So it's going to take a little time before he can detach himself from these elements, and certainly to gain the upper hand whereby he can push forward. Now, sorry, there's one thing I want to throw back at you, because people should bear in mind in Ireland that mosques and Islamic cultural centers are the recipients of foreign money from certain states. And I think people should be aware of that. These things don't spring up out of nothing.
Uh, just say that again, Marco. That you just went out there for a
I
second. Just
missed
say
you.
that last bit.
Okay, what I was saying was that many mosques and these Islamic centers are to a great extent being financed by foreign actors, especially pernicious actors such as the Qataris. So I think your viewers should be aware of this fact.
Yeah, and I think it was also mentioned, that we need to be careful about how our universities are being funded and where the funding for them comes from as well,
Certainly, certainly,
because of what we've seen in the United States
certainly, certainly,
in relation
certainly.
to funding coming
Yeah.
from Qatar and other places. Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely. This
and
goes back a long way, by the way, Eugene. Well, one has to bear in mind that subsequent to the oil crisis of 1973, where the Arabs began using oil as a weapon, Ireland became the object of great interest to these regimes. And money was funded, students were sent over. So here you can see certain processes beginning to take shape and to develop.
Now, we've about 10 minutes left, just under 10 minutes left, Marco, and I want to touch on two other topics, and that again the Irish are being fed a different line,
Mm,
and one of them is the aid, humanitarian aid that's happening in Gaza now. We're told all the time here that the UN is the body. The UN is they just love the UN. The UN is just
mm,
that we must obey them, and that the UN is everything and everything that's good.
mm.
Now, clearly that is not the situation, because uh, UNRWA uh, has exacerbated the situation in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza for decades, has it not?
Yes, UNRWA is a hostile actor. UNRWA has always been a hostile actor. It has extended funds, infrastructure to terrorist organizations. And in reality, UNRWA and Hamas are one in these areas. There's a complete symbiosis.
And what's and this goes back to your when you say that the Palestinians are and Hamas are openly tell us what they want to do, and
Indeed,
when
indeed.
you see one of the conditions that the Hamas are trying to force upon Israel in these current ceasefire negotiations, that the UN resume all aid in the Gaza territory,
Mm,
and uh, uh, what you have in there at the moment is you have GHF, this
yes,
foundation,
yeah,
um, uh, which is replacing the UN's um,
yes,
distribution methods, normal, accepted. Uh,
yes. It's replacing them and taking it from the hands of Hamas.
right. So,
So
so
this is
just
the object of
tell,
the
tell
exercise.
tell our listeners here what has been happening before GHF came on board and the UN were bringing in aid into Gaza. What was happening?
Well, the aid was completely hijacked by Hamas and stole and sold to the population for extortionate prices. People attempting to gain access to this aid were murdered. So this tells us what Hamas is, as if we didn't know, but they're quite prepared to murder their own people.
Uh, and the okay, so the GHF, uh, the GHF in distributing that food, it seems to me that from what I hear from even from Colonel Kemp,
Mm.
the former British
Officer,
commander
yeah,
in
yeah,
Afghanistan,
yeah.
Richard Kemp.
Mm.
Uh, he visited some GHF sites and said
Yes,
that the Palestinian or the people of Gaza were overwhelmed that they could actually get this food in safety and get it for free.
Yes, yes,
And
that's
and
right.
but uh, there's also the UN is trying to discredit this method, because now this crowd have come in and now they don't want them there. There's an attempt to discredit them, isn't there?
Of
Or is there?
course, of course. But look, you have to understand what the UN is. It's basically a crime syndicate. I think one cannot get away from this fact. It's composed of undemocratic to the majority of states that compose it are undemocratic, illiberal, dictatorial, oppressive entities. One cannot expect anything from the UN. The UN needs to be disbanded. Expect nothing good from the UN.
Now, and just finally, I just want to revert back to something that was on one of your podcasts with Vitter in the Witty Vitter, in relation to the Nobel Peace Prize. Now,
Yeah.
to me, looking at some of the candidates that are being put forward for this Peace Prize, it makes an absolute laugh of the whole thing. I mean, you have Guterres, the UN General Secretary,
Yes. Yeah.
put forward
Yeah.
for peace. I mean,
It's a theater of the absurd, Eugene. It's a theater of the absurd.
yeah. And what do you call that? What do you call what's her name from
Francesca Albanese. Francesca Albanese.
Yeah. No, but the Swedish, or the Swedish one that was on the boat out to.
Oh, Greta.
Greta. She's also been touted for
nominated
for as well. And Trump is. I don't know what. I know Paddy Power was saying he was in second place. I don't know where he lies now. But the whole thing is laughable, is it not?
If it weren't tragic, it would be laughable. Yes. Certainly, yes. Look, it's not as if they're not known for being absurd. Just bear in mind who are the recipients in the past. Yasser Arafat, arch terrorist. President Obama, who did nothing.
Oh, Vitter is after sending in a text. So is Taylor Swift.
She may have more merits than some of the other candidates.
She may have. It's right. Yeah, but I mean, it's laughable what's been proposed. I actually do think that Donald Trump is a worthy nominee.
Certainly better than the other candidates by far.
I mean, I know not everything, and I've always said this. I don't agree with everything he's doing. I do not agree with everything he's doing, but certainly he does want peace. Now, peace must come through strength. It can't happen any other way, because otherwise it just falls back into what it was.
Yes.
So you negotiate peace through strength, and I think that Benjamin Netanyahu has certainly done that, and so has Donald Trump. In fairness, in fairness, that to come on side with Israel to take out Iran's nuclear capability. I mean, was just that he's certainly gone up in my estimation anyway as a result of that.
Yes.
But look, Marco, we're going to leave it there. I want to really thank you for giving us a different side of events in Israel, in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, and and contrary to what we're being fed here by the mainstream media and the chattering classes here in relation to it. I really enjoyed our conversation tonight.
My pleasure.
It was really enlightening, and thank you very much for it. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Eugene. My pleasure. I just like to add one thing, that I am more concerned about Ireland than I am about Israel.
Okay, well,
I think people really need to, as we used to say on the Owl Sod, to cop on to what's happening.
Yeah, and people can still drop a comment in the chat even after this. They can still drop a comment in it, and we'd appreciate anything you do. But and then if you want to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button. And also, if you would like and share, if you're after enjoying what you've heard this evening on the show. We're leaving it on that note that Marco has said, it's really powerful, saying he's more worried about Ireland than Israel. That says it all, really, doesn't it? Okay, until the next time here on The Green Zone, Conversations with Eugene Doyle. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back again soon. Thank you.